Welcome, everybody, to the Mando Fan Show. We are live. Thank you for joining us here on the Resistance Broadcast YouTube channel. If you are not subscribed yet, make sure you do. We just started this channel a few months ago, so if you're watching, hopefully just hit the button. And if you're listening on audio thereafter, head over to youtube.com/@theResistanceBroadcast and subscribe to the channel for notifications on these videos and all the other stuff we're doing over here. But most of all, just thank you for joining us on this wonderful episode. I'm John, James and Lacey with me as always, and our guest, our good friend who's been on the show several times. He was last on the Mando Fan Show for chapter 4 of the Book of Boba Fett, I believe. You know him from Fantha Tracks, a wonderful Star Wars news website, and StarWars.com, Star Wars Insider, and also he helps make things work at Star Wars Celebration. Welcome back, rise and shine, Mark Newbold. What's up, buddy?
Hello. How are you? I've gone for the mood lighting to donate how early it is. It's just all about atmosphere, isn't it? So
yes. It is. Yes. I mean, there are some dark moments in this season of The Mandalorian, so you're just sort of like setting that vibe, which I appreciate, Mark.
Totally. It's all about vibe, definitely.
Yes. Now, we're going to get into the episode. So first and foremost, thanks to everybody who is joining us live in the live chat. We appreciate it very much. Just so you know, we get a lot of comments in here, but if you want your comment to be read on the show and reacted to by us, we do have super chats available that will launch you right up to the top of the list. And of course, just sit back and have a good time. Mark, before we get into the show, for anybody who doesn't know where they can find the site, everything you got going on, let them know where your pods are, all that stuff.
Best place, fanthatracks.com. So that's the website, hub of all things Fantha Tracks. We've got social media, obviously, all the different social media things. We've got a YouTube channel and website, podcast rather, as well. So we've got, in fact, we launched a new podcast yesterday, which you would barely know because it was only 2 minutes long. It was only the trailer for it. But yeah, so we've got all sorts of different stuff going on. So fanthatracks.com is Fantha Tracks at all the socials. And I'm usually on Twitter, causing trouble, prefect_timing, but Star Wars Insider, of course. So that's a rather good thing to have a read of if you're a Star Wars fan.
Excellent, yeah. And you're going to be podcasting at Celebration, right? With Making Tracks.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, very fortunate. We've got, as I say, we've got a number of podcasts, and we've ended up with 5 of them are involved at Celebration in various forms or fashion. So we've been very lucky, and the bribes never go through that smoothly. So I just can't believe we managed to pull it off. So. but it did. So so all good, and it's only a week away. I mean, what day is it for you at the moment?
It is Wednesday.
Time travel is Thursday for me.
Yeah.
So it's a week tomorrow. Essentially. Till Celebration starts. And it's my birthday tomorrow as well. So, but that's
happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Is it your birthday on Wednesday or Thursday? Thursday or Friday?
Friday. me and Ewan McGregor. So.
Ooh.
Oh, you're meeting Ewan McGregor?
No, me and Ewan McGregor.
Oh, you and Ewan McGregor. Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm hoping to meet him next week, and I'm expecting him to remember and buy me a pint or something, but he never does.
So. That would be amazing. Let me know. I'd love to watch you guys from the other side of the bar.
What do you serve?
Okay. And thank you to all of our patrons who support TRB for making this show possible and everything that we're doing and going to be doing at Celebration. So if you haven't yet, at least check it out. Patreon.com/Resistance Broadcast. Our tiers start at just $5 for access to all the additional content we do. And more importantly, we're just thankful for any and all support you're able to provide to us. But now it's time to get on with the show. We start this thing off by sort of easing into it by rating the episode on what we call the Pedro Pascal face scale. Now, when we started this, Pedro's face wasn't as popular as it is now, because now he's GIFs, he's memes, he's everything that's going on viral, whether it's with Nicolas Cage and Mama Cass or him eating a cracker or grilled cheese. Pedro's face is everywhere, but we're going to see a lot of him in just a minute, because what we do is we rate the episodes 0 to 10. Now, this is Chapter 21, The Pirate, written by Jon Favreau and directed by Peter Ramsey, who, in my opinion, did a stellar job on this episode. So we're going to rate this thing 0 to 10. Halves are aloud, and we'll give our score, and then we'll check in with our patrons and see what they scored this. But James, you drew the straw first this week. What did you give Chapter 21, The Pirate?
I give it a 9. Highest so far this season. I think this was a near perfect episode, just because there were everything that I want to see. Like, it had good storyline, it had good action, it had good pacing, it had reveals in multiple ways. It was just all around surprise after surprise, and I was just happy the whole time. And if it was an ice cream sundae, the cherry on the top was that one of my predictions was right too, but I also think one of my predictions was wrong. But we'll get there.
As that happens, yeah.
As that happens, yeah.
A 9 is a stellar score, and I have a feeling that that's going to be a theme going forward here. Mark, we're going to pass it over to you. What did you give Chapter 21?
I gave it, because I can do half scores, I gave it 8.5 for me.
Great score. Yes. Yeah. Now, was this your favorite episode so far this season?
Of season 3 so far, yeah. Not that I think there's been anything other than good episodes. There's been unexpected episodes, and intriguing episodes, and fun and enjoyable, and all the other stuff. But this one really was, like James said, it sort of had a little bit of everything. The action was amazing. The visuals were stunning.
Yes.
The music stood out as well. Really interesting.
Right. Yeah.
Just everything about it was tip top, and like you say, left me in a good place.
Yeah, and I'm following that up. I'm gonna copy what you have there. 8.5 for me as well. My favorite episode of the season so far, and I think you put it great. And I think that something about that time of the episode, I feel like sometimes when it's the 33 minutes, I'm like, ooh, that went by too quick. And sometimes if it's 58 to an hour, I'm like, all right. But that 40-something minute, to 50 minute seems like perfect. And the way they loaded this thing up, even little subtle nuances, like you're saying about the music or some background stuff, it's such a loaded episode that you can't just watch this one once. Whereas some others, I feel like you can. Just well done by Peter Ramsey. And, we know he has a track record of success. So if his name came up for bigger things, I would not be disappointed. I'll just leave it at that. All right, so big scores. So pressure's on, Lacey. What'd you give Chapter 21?
I gave Chapter 21 9 big Carson Teva faces.
Carson Teva faces. James is like, I don't have that graphic.
Or should I say Bo-Katan faces? Because we all know what happened.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't Pedro Pascal. Sorry, James. I don't mean to make James like, come on.
Panicking.
I'm changing it now.
I've never seen James sweat before, so this will be unusual for me. I've never seen him in a blind panic sweating in front of an audience. So I can't wait to see what happens.
That is Mark's go-to roast of James.
That is it's this lovely bit that he has ongoing with James for 4 years now.
It's all these things are so crazy, because that first one was nuts. It was our first and all that, and then the second one we did was like on our own. So I was like, it just has to fall on me 100%. So I was like sweating to the second one.
Anyway,
and now,
this year,
James
he's been panicking for 3 weeks. He's like,
I'm panicking now, so I don't have to panic then.
There you go.
That's fair.
All right.
What's our
wait,
score?
Hold on. I didn't give my explanation.
Oh,
yeah. Go ahead, Lacey. Yeah.
So I thought this episode was pure Star Wars to me. Everything about it screamed Star Wars. It was a blast to watch from beginning to end. And I find that my ratings are based on how much I'm smiling. And I smiled this entire episode. So that's why I gave it a 9. My favorite this season.
The whole episode.
Yeah. This seems to be what a lot of people are saying too. I didn't see too many people saying they dislike this episode. So I expected a great score, and we got one. James, we're locking this one in at an 8.75. Look at all those Pedro faces on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on audio, this is one of those situations where you may want to hop over to the video to see how much Pedro is on the screen.
That scores off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7.7.
That's we're missing a full head. Let the sweating begin.
You know what else is funny about this too? Is that when I was doing it, I was like, I counted through, and then I was like, yeah, that's right. And then I was like, I was moving it down, and I was like, weird. We had a lower score this week than last week.
But in the sometimes you don't change things for the special edition, right? Sometimes you leave the things in there, and we're gonna leave that
By
in
the
there
way,
for now.
Aaron asks me in the comments, Lacey, what would make it a 10? Luke Skywalker.
Another head.
Another head, or a hand. All right, well, let's check in and see what our patrons.
Oh, wait till
scored
you
this
see
one.
this. Here it comes.
Gave it an 8.8.
Watch this. Boop.
Oh my God, James is making the graphics. All right, that is an
Maybe you
8.8.
should just add in a Paul Carson Teva head just to make it
Right.
good.
Yeah. Good.
Or just write, if you have a tablet, just draw Pedro's face and do not bill us for destroying your tablet or phone. But high scores, 8.75 for us, 8.8 for patrons. And let's check in with a couple of comments. The first one came in from Matt Ham, who said 9 Pedro faces for me. I loved it. All the feels. So good seeing Zeb in live action. Yes. Would have loved to have seen James's face when that dropped.
Me too.
At first,
Me too.
I was like, oh no, not space pirates again, especially when I heard the Mando theme crossed with a sea shanty vibe, but quickly came around to it and ended up loving it. So, James, can you replicate what your face was when you saw Zeb on screen for our video watchers? Okay, so for our audio listeners, James is ferociously punching the air with both fists in excitement.
We waited for James watched this episode, The Last of Us, Pedro, pun intended, the last of the group. So when John and I were talking about it, I had to delete all our comments very quickly. Yes. And I said to James, I was like, James, I'm waiting on your reaction, because when I saw this episode, I was like, this episode was made for James. They went into James' brain. All it was missing was the Purgles. It would have been
a good time to be a Rebels
we already
fan.
got him.
I know.
I mean, they could have dropped a lot that would have been absolutely perfect. But yeah. But
they could have had
Chopper. This is what we need. Yeah.
Chopper slinging drinks at the Delphi base.
I was thinking about that because I was like, oh, Zeb is the first Rebels character to make it to live action, and then I was like, actually, no, he's not.
Yeah. All right. Our next comment was from Derek Smith, who said, also 9 Pedros, many standout moments, but seeing Zeb was amazing. Are Delphi Rangers going to be the previously announced Rangers of the New Republic? I think that's a big question everyone's asking. Ooh. We will get to that and talk about that, I'm sure. He said, I hope so. Zeb has the muscles instead of Cara Dune. That's fine by me. Navarro's scenes were excellent. I hope Gorian was in an escape pod. Me too. Bo and the Armors had a great scene. I'm loving where they're going with this. Finally, Gideon being sprung by Mandalorians, or are they being framed by whoever bombed Bo's castle? So much to unpack. Yes, and we're going to do our best to do that. But before we get to our chat about this episode, we do have a super chat, so we're going to see what they had to say, right, Lacey?
Yes. So the super chat that we have currently, James, do you mind bringing down that Patreon score?
Absolutely.
Thank you all so much.
Right there.
Aaron, thank you so much for the super chat. We truly appreciate it. He said, this was one of my favorite episodes of all 3 seasons. This proves that this show does not need to lean on Grogu. This episode was great, but it also elevated previous episodes this season. We also have some additional super chats. Thank you, other Aaron. Double Aaron tonight. He said, do you think the Mandalorian will be Bo-Katan, walking both paths and likely to ride the Mythosaur?
That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Mark, what do you think? Do you think that she's the Mandalorian?
I think when they came up with the title of the show and didn't sort of pin it on a specific person, they were being very savvy. I don't think that could be very easily read that way. And obviously, as we'll get into, there's every eventuality that could become, the way it goes. But yeah, it's a good observation. It's quite possible. Yeah.
What do you guys think, James, John? I know I felt that way while I was talking through my watch along on Patreon, because I do them in the morning of Mandalorian. I would do these new watch alongs on Patreon. So if you're interested, head over there. I was talking the whole time being like, oh, I think it was last week. I was like, oh, could the Mandalorian beat Grogu? Because they were making that armor and everything. And I was like, oh, could the Mandalorian beat Bo-Katan this week? So every week my brain is like, who is the
Yeah,
Mandalorian?
I think Mark, you nailed it with it being a smart choice for the wording of how they could do
Ambiguous,
it, because then they make it ambiguous. But at the end of the day, I feel like it kind of reminds me of Rebels, for instance. Like you're watching season 1 and season 2, and you go, "Oh, Ezra, he's the main character," and then when you get into season 3, you're like, "Is Sabine the main character?" Like all of a sudden, that season 3 really took a turn towards that character and put her at the forefront. But then when you get to season 4, you're like, no, it's about Ezra. It's always been about Ezra, you know. So I think we're going to return, but I think that season 3 has the ability to sort of play with the title and play with our emotions and explore other main characters.
Great
Yeah.
answer. Oh, sorry.
I'll
John.
just say I think there'd be I like the idea because Bo-Katan has been around for such a long time, but I think there would
She's
be
so good.
I think there would be a little bit of bait and switch feeling out of fans that you introduce this new character. It's his new show. The first episode is called The Mandalorian, and he shows up on screen. He's called Mando by everybody, and then they're going to be like, you know what? He's not the guy though, even though it's his show.
Right,
So
he is not the Mandalorian.
I think it's still going to be Din Djarin, whether he lives or not. I have no idea. And then they could sort of like have her take over or something like that. Just weird speculation, but I still think he's the one right now.
Awesome. Next, we have Chibigon89, aka Danny. Hey, Danny. Thanks for the super chat. She said, "Is it just me, or do the Mandalorians keep looking at Din and Bo-Katan for a lot of leadership decisions on this episode?" Eye emoji. Again, subtle hints for a power couple.
Thanks,
Danny,
Danny.
I see you, and I totally get that vibe. I also got a vibe that the Mandalorian was internally screaming when she walked up, and the armor was like, "Present someone that doesn't need to wear their helmet." And Mandalorian's like, "What did I just go through?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
That
What
was
do you guys
probably a tough pill for Mando to Emily swallow, if I have to be honest.
Yeah.
Poor
I don't know.
Emily.
I'm kind of looking at this. I don't know. There's a couple times, like obviously he's been handed the hammer, so he's presenting and he looks like a leader. I don't know. There's a couple things here that I'm like, I see how we're focusing on these characters, but I think we're only focusing on them because the story is focusing on them, and I think they're getting all the opportunity that they would anyway to speak or talk or present an idea. Like when KRATZ shows up, he's addressing the Mandalorians, but he's really talking to Din Djarin. So Din Djarin walks forward, not as a leader, but because that's who he came to see, you know. A couple things like that. And then Bo-Katan's her own story, because the only person who's like really having a conversation with her is the armor at this point. And I think that's just because the armor is like, you're Bo-Katan. Like,
Right.
I know who you are. You are a huge celebrity. You have this ability to walk both worlds. We should utilize your fame and your reputation. So I think that's why she's getting looked at that way. But I don't disagree with how this episode looked. They definitely felt like they were standing out, both those characters in the group.
What'd you guys think?
Hold on one second. I'll be right back.
I don't know. Mark, do you think there's any sort of relationship romance type of thing being kindled here?
I'm old enough to remember watching Moonlighting back in the 80s and the X-Files in the 90s, and it was always that Will, Mulder and Scully, Maddie
Will
and
they,
David.
won't they? Yeah.
Well, exactly. And, you know, it was fun to a point, and then when they did, it kind of not sunk, but it altered both shows. I don't think this is that. But I do sort of look at the characters, and the fact that there's an attraction is perfectly natural if there was, because they do know each other and have got a sort of a growing history. But like you say, like James said, and it's something to consider, because if you're new to Bo-Katan as a character in The Mandalorian, unlike us who've kind of known her for 10 years, when she rocks up in Clone Wars in 2011 or whatever it was. She is kind of a rock star, and she has had this massive history with Mandalore, and she kind of is a celebrity to Mandalorians. And so you watch it in its isolation, and she's just turned up at the covert, and the armor is the boss, and there's all the respect in the world for that. And you can kind of see in real time Bo respecting the process of how they're treating their Mandalorianism, if you want to call it that. And yet here's the armor, as you say, sort of going, well, actually, You know, you are the one that can do these things, and we need more than this. And I like that you can analyze the situation and kind of go, oh, Mando's just gone through all of that, and she just takes the hat off, and that washes away everything that just happened. That's not how life works. It's a live situation, and the goalposts literally changed in this episode. Certainly to the armorer's point of view, and in terms of allowing people to go off and do stuff or giving them permission or making it just easier as a team. If the armorer says, take your helmet off, go and do it, that's the way it's going to go.
There was a moment I was nervous, though, when she said, take it off. I was like, don't do it. Don't do it.
She's like, gotcha.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was an gotcha. Actually,
You are a
my point of view on
Mandalorian
that
no more.
was that Armor was going to take her helmet off too. That was
I thought so
thing.
too.
Oh,
yeah. And but my quick thing on this is like there's like two tactics potentially at play here. One, she like you were sort of alluding to, Mark, the armor, and she said it as much. You know, she realizes she needs more Mandalorians than what the Creed is like holding people to, and also the fact that she could be using it as a way to sort of test the patience and will to be involved of Din Djarin, because he could be like, you know, this is garbage. You know, you had me almost get killed to go do this thing to this place that you said was poisoned and there's beasts and all this stuff, and then you just say like, hey, pop the helmet off. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So
I did wonder whether we were going to get a scene like in Andor when they're flying back to the township on the ship at the end, and they silently swap caps. I just wondered whether Bo was going to try on the armorer's helmet, and then the armorer's going to try on her helmet. I don't know. I mean, maybe
They're going to have a
Give it a
sleepover,
shot.
paint their
Probably a
nails,
stretch.
pillow fight, you know, just have a girls' night.
Oh, I wasn't thinking that far ahead, but maybe in episode 7. But you know,
Our next super chat's Kyle Beckworth. Hey, Cal. What up, Kyle?
Kyle.
He said, best episode of the season so far. Zeb looked so good. He
Yeah.
did. Thanks for the stickers. I received them in the mail. Made my day. So happy that you guys got your stickers from Patreon. Head over to Patreon if you're interested. And last but not least, we have Miles. Thank you so much for the super chat. He said, Mando brought me light after horror from Bad Batch.
and we won't spoil Bad Batch here.
Yeah,
But,
I'd love to talk about it, but I don't want to say anything if people haven't watched it, because Mando usually comes first for a lot of people.
They're like, I'll go check out the Mando fan show. They never talk about Bad Batch on there. It's going to be safe. And then we're like, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
blah.
if you want to
And
know Bad Batch, go do Bad Batch reaction show. I put up the episode already. And speaking of things that I did, I also made this for us. Just added an extra 2 on the end there.
All Sun Young Lee in the house on the Patreon store. All right, here we go. Let's get into this right now. First, I'm going to do this quick just for the sake of time. Someone throwing tomatoes at me for the swallow joke, I assume.
Yes.
All right. So the Mando code this week, you know the deal. We're giving away a collection of items at the end of the season, and we're giving a hint away for you to collect on each episode. So this week, we're giving away the 5th number, and the 5th number in the Mando code is 2. So make sure you jot that down, keep it wherever you keep the other numbers, and be a good bounty hunter and don't share it with others, because that's not what bounty hunters do for the most part. All right, so let's get into this thing. Mark, loaded episode, as you said. Did you have a favorite line, moment, shot that you were like, I love that?
Not a specific one, because it felt continuously loaded with cool moments and like welcomingly distracting moments. And I suppose we kind of talked about the one that people are going to talk about the most. Like last week, it was Ahmed's character turning up, Gilleran turning up, and that was the hook moment for that episode. And this week, in a different way, in a smaller way, but no less important, it was Zeb turning up, you know, and it being Steve Bloom doing the voice, and that was, oh, okay, now we've got 2 dots to connect. Now we kind of figure out where he went from the end of the last time we saw him and chart a path. So that was exciting, and I think it's like obviously we've got Ahsoka coming, and we've mentioned Rebels characters turning up in things before. So, you know, Favloni, as I like to call them, are very good at sort of linking these things together and seeding stuff, you know, other stuff we're going to see. So whilst it wasn't the single best moment, because there was lots of very cool bits, I think that's probably the one that you think back to when you talk about this episode. That's the one where Zeb turned up. So I would probably say that.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to go with probably one of the dogfight moments over Navarro, and I liked it for a couple of reasons, and it was So Grief Karga talking to Mando as he's trying to fight the pirates, and he's saying like 10-1, like you're a bit outnumbered, and he says, I like those odds, which is now that Mando's been around so long, it's a callback to itself, because he says that in like the first episode of The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
And he does this maverick spin move, and the two pirates crash into each other, classic Star Wars folly style, and explode. Which I almost wish he said now it's 8-1, or pulled one of those. But Favreau probably reeled back the cheese a little bit, and that's all right. But that moment, I just thought it was cool because the shot was quick, and the way they collided, and the way the music was going, and the dialogue saying I like those odds. I just thought it was a very cool, like how George Lucas likes going fast in space type of Star Wars moment. So I really enjoyed that moment during that dogfight. And also, again, I'm gonna keep saying this, Peter Ramsey. There was no part in this episode where I was like, ooh, they pinched a few pennies on that shot. I felt like this felt really theatrical and big, and every shot felt its worth, and I thought it was great. So great job on those dogfights, and the action was stellar. Lacey, you're up next. Did you have a favorite moment, shot, or line from Chapter 21?
So I have to say, out of all the episodes, this was the hardest one for me because there were so many really, really cool moments and or shots that I thoroughly enjoyed. I would say kind of the Anzellans altogether are always great. The fact that they got Shirley Henderson back to do them is just so perfect to me.
Everything's gonna be all right.
Yeah. Come see this. Come over here. But I think my favorite shot is when they're at the Rebellion bar and they do a slide shot past Filoni and Rick and Deb. They do a really beautiful, like they had it on a slider behind them, and you get to see a glimpse of them, but then it keeps moving and they shoot through them to the conversation with Paul and then eventually Zeb. It's just such a cool shot. That and the pan up when Paz Vizsla lands on the ground and the camera pans up to him is such an epic hero shot that it was just perfectly done by Peter Ramsey.
Yeah, and how about Trapper Wolf wearing the same hat as Dave Filoni? So that's
he was
now.
actually wearing more of a brownish hat.
I felt like it was very similar though. It's like the Star Wars version of it.
Yes, I really wanted the black hat, like the Filoni black hat, but it was definitely more of like you can't wear your black hat, but you can wear this one.
Yeah, it's like what Cad Bane wears or whatever. Similar type of.
I think we need George Sakul to turn up. That's what we need. We need George Sakul to turn up in a plaid shirt, and everything's good with the universe. That's what I think.
I agree. If he was sitting there eating some Panda Express or drinking or whatever, I would have loved it. The other thing, Lacey, you bring up Paz Vizsla, and now we'll get into it. You never see Batman Begins when Commissioner Gordon first sees the Batmobile and he goes, I gotta get me one of those.
Mm-hmm.
He's walking around with his gun that is mowing down everything, and everyone else is like, pew, 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 pew. I would be like, can we all just get that? We'll be completely fine if we each have one of those weapons. And he's like, out of my way. Blang, mowing everybody down. So I just thought that was a big time shot, and of course it's Favreau voicing the character, so all right, James, favorite shot, moment, line from Chapter 21.
So we're going to talk about it more, but I'm going to use the opportunity to talk about something different, because the one is it's got to be the Zeb shot, right? That's just the biggest moment for me. It's the biggest height in the thing, seeing that character and watching him just being totally blown away. But I want to talk about something specific that we might not talk about if we don't, and that is Grief Karga talking to the hologram version of Gorian Shard. I loved that scene. I loved it. It was so awesome. It's like the way it was like moving around him and stuff. I was like, this feels like I'm watching a Star Wars movie, and I fell in love with Gorian Shard like immediately when I saw him, and he's like this giant Jabba walking puppet Muppet thing. I'm like, that is cool, and I hope he returns. And I'm still saying that as of today because he might be dead. We don't know. But when he came back, I was like, this is awesome. All the scenes with him, but specifically that hologram scene and their conversation back and forth, like how they were like, oh, weird, I hear the voice of this person, but what I see before me is this. And I loved it. It was so well written, so exciting. And And even how it ends, like, don't call me back unless you're calling to surrender. And then it just hangs up. He runs over to the window. It's so good. I loved it. I loved the scene. It's probably my favorite scene besides just, you know, that like crazy nostalgic or payoff thing from Zeb, right?
Yeah. And you know, James messaged us earlier today. He was the last one to watch it. And he wrote, Gorian Shard, R.I.P. To which I replied, nah, he got away. He salad out the back door. And so James goes, possible. It remains to be seen. To which I said, let us discuss more in detail tonight.
There it is.
To which I said nothing and didn't talk to them for like 3 hours.
There you go.
That's true. Yeah, she was cold as iceberg.
I can't add any more puns. I nearly said everything comes with a cost. But that's terrible.
I've been calling him Kale Organa. All right. So let's just talk about the episode in general. A lot to unpack. It seems like this was everyone's favorite episode. There was so much going on that we're already tying in the sort of seeds that were planted in previous episodes. We see the character. I already forget her name. That's Katie played, the one who was like
Kane.
Aaliyah Kane, yeah. So we see her, and she clearly is trying to do everything she can to prevent
sucks.
them from going to Navarro.
Yeah, I was just thinking that exact phrase. I was like,
yeah.
Like,
so what do we think's going on there with that? Why is she trying to prevent them from going to Navarro specifically? Like, she clearly has concerns, and she was doing everything she can to say, no, don't worry about Navarro.
They'll realize the shuttle is there with him not on it, I think.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if there's more to Navarro where it's like, all right, it's an independent system. It's not part of the Republic. It has no ties to anything. Is this a bigger play? Who is she working for is what I want to know. Is she working for Thrawn, who's out there, and like, is he working for someone who's trying to rebuild the Empire, and they're trying to get all these independent systems under lockdown? You know, so I'm just curious. Like, I was thinking bigger picture. Like, what do you guys think in terms of like, did that give you any sort of inkling as to who she might be really working for at this point?
Are the pirates being hired by Moff Gideon?
That's the whole thing, and the ending sort of switched everything up too, so.
Clearly still working for Moff Gideon. We all know this, right? Are we all on that same page?
100% yes.
Or whoever Moff Gideon was working for.
I mean, I guess that's fair, but to me, she still seems very loyal to him. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
She sucks.
I mean, you're right. I mean, technically, she could go above and beyond, but it just feels like they need a way to get Moff Gideon back into the story, and I feel like she's the lead-in to that.
So, I think it was the second or third episode. Someone mentioned, whether it was Bo-Katan or somebody, saying they heard that Moff Gideon. Oh, it was the third episode with Pershing, where those saved people, L87G29 or whatever, were saying, like, I heard Moff Gideon was hooked up to a mind flare. Now, if that's true, we saw her operating the mind flare and really screwing up Pershing. Is that a reality here that happened, where Gideon was taken to a mind flare and his brain got reconfigured or something, and then someone else, like, I don't know. Why would they bring that up in a line? I don't think Favreau is accidental with these little small lines. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's a good observation, because obviously, and that includes us now, even though we've seen the shuttle and we've kind of identified that was the lambda class that he was in. That it's all happenstance and rumor at this moment with Gideon, and we're seeing the mechanics of the New Republic in that third episode of season 3. You just see how massive it is. The very Andor feeling episode, and that the Republic's now just turned into a massive bureaucracy that's toothless. And we kind of know from this era that they want to demilitarize, and it is all very well. They're heading on a fast track to a bad place, aren't they? Once again, in a totally different way to the way they did before, the way the Empire did it, the way the Republic took its eye off the ball. Now this Republic's, taking leaps when it should be taking baby steps, because the galaxy's not ready for so much of what's
That's a good point.
Ahead. Yeah. So I do think that, it's a lot of stuff has been missed in relation to Gideon, on the broadest sense. So it's a perfect time for him, and I would imagine I think there's a connection, but she's probably not the only operative that's running interference. But that's what this felt like. Every time somebody rocks up from, especially from that part of the galaxy, and she's there, she heard it straight away. She clearly recognised him. She's his communications officer, so she's probably quite very aware of Carson Teva. So but he probably has never seen her. She'd have come up on his scopes, but not the other way around.
Right, and then he focused on her emblem, which I didn't look up. That there's clearly significance there as to what that meant. Does that mean she was former Imperial? Is that what that?
Yeah, that's the amnesty program, isn't it? So
okay, yeah. I mean, there's just so I love this episode so much, but coming out of it, I felt like I had way more questions, which is always a good thing. Yeah. Especially we have ways to go here, and Bryce Dallas Howard doing the next episode, which I think is going to have a lot of hype behind it after the episode she's done so far, from directing. So, I don't know, any other thoughts on that, guys, in terms of her character's motivations? Or
people did bring up the fact that last season there was a whole episode where they have that cloning facility on Navarro. Yeah. So
that's a good point too. Yeah, there might be a bigger thing going on with as far as the
Gene's Guy episode.
Yeah.
I mean, the last time on the Mandalorian or whatever, the preview that shows you things that have happened, it goes back to the first season with the client and Dr. Pershing and that cloning, room where they had Grogu in. So they're clearly hinting toward that for sure.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's a ground for the Empire, and as they're moving forward, they probably still have a lot of secrets there. And I think it's very possible that Moff Gideon hired the pirates to come in and kind of wipe out and destabilize the town. And then as in that same time frame, he's like, escaping and setting up his plans. And now he's starting to work his other former people within the New Republic as well to take out some of the people that he had been working with, including Dr. Pershing and other things. You know what I mean? It just all seems like it's headed towards Moff Gideon getting back on top as like I'm pulling all the strings here, what we really fell in love with season 1. Cause I think season 2, they took a turn and then they were like, yeah, maybe we bring him back to that point where he's actually quite capable and quite powerful as far as being like the head of an organization, an evil organization. But I do want to take a second and just mention, because we haven't talked about it at all, Tim Meadows is in this episode.
Yes.
Which the crazy thing is, I have to give her credit. Molly Damon pointed him out weeks ago and was like, that looks like Tim Meadows. And I was like,
oh, really? Holy cow.
She
good job.
Totally
Molly
did in the background of the trailer. And she had said, like, is that him? And I was like, I don't see it, but that's weird. And then he showed up and I was like, oh my God, she's right.
Favreau
he was in the trailer and we missed it?
Like in the background, blurred out, yeah.
Wow.
That's wild. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like, and then Horatio Sands season 1, it's like Favreau just like got most of his cast from like late 90s SNL. He's like, come on in. Come on, Mandalorian. All right, well,
he basically was the principal in Mean Girls. In this,
he was the principal in Mean Girls. Yeah,
no, that's what I'm saying. Is like his role here is basically the principal of the Mean Girls. Like the company's like, why do I have all these problems in front of me? Stop being annoying.
I think we should now that we're talking about Moff Gideon, talk about the end and give our thoughts on that. I just have this weird theory because I don't know if you guys remember this, but you know how Giancarlo Esposito can be a little bit loose-lipped with stuff, and he's pretty candid. He said something in an interview last year about how this guy's obsessed with Mandalorians or something like that. Is there any? And we saw him wielding the Darksaber, and in my opinion, he was doing a better job of it than Din Djarin was.
Yeah.
Is there any chance this guy was a Mandalorian and they used the Mind Flare on him to program him to be Imperial?
It's a possibility.
It's possible.
That might just be a
further away theory than yours. So let's explore yours first.
Well, I don't know if there's much to that. It's just pretty much throwing it out there because, I don't know what the Mind Flare does, but to me, it's like reconditioning and like fortifying.
I think they erased his mind fully. I think he's gone. Homeboy's done. Pershing.
Oh, Pershing. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with him, but I'm saying if they use the same thing for Moff Gideon.
Did they? Did they say that they did?
Well, that was the thing. We don't know if it's true or not, but one of the amnesty people had said I had heard that they hooked him up to a mind flare, and they were talking about Moff Gideon.
Mm.
I
So
think
my
for
theory
me,
is
that
he
is
was
just
Mando. Yeah.
all I was gonna say was, to me, that statement was just like, I heard he blah blah blah, I heard he, and then it's supposed to be like that nobody really knows. So if you heard he
Just throwaway.
escaped,
Okay.
it's just a throwaway. That's probably also just a rumor. You know, I think
Mhm.
it was just two rumors to set up the third thing, which was actually the truth, that he had escaped and never went to trial. But because the other two things are also crazy, you're supposed to understand how people would hear that rumor and not believe it and throw it away because we've heard two or three or multiple other rumors. That's the only thing I think those two lines were set up for. But, you know, I mean, crazier things have happened. I mean, they could have the guy, he could be hooked up to a mind flare now, come back and be like, that was the old me, and he's like part of the team now. They can do anything they want.
Yeah.
Who knows? He's had
Yeah.
a change of heart. He's one of the good guys now. I don't
It's
know.
total recall, isn't it? It could, that mind flare, we don't really know what it does. It could wipe out personalities. It could bring personalities back. They could have overlaid a personality on him. And you're right, he was great with that Darksaber. And like Bo's great with the Darksaber, and there's others that have been great with the Darksaber, and Din doesn't really believe in whatever enough to wield it, and yet he could be the reluctant leader. We don't know yet; it's too far out to tell. But with Gideon, yeah, I mean, you've got the Remnant, and there's going to be members of the Remnant that are loyal to the process of an empire. Let's put it that way. The ideals of an empire, and some that are loyal to the Emperor. And others, because it's fragmented, and you know that's kind of the point. And so you just don't know who's playing who at this point. And as I say, you've got Elia Kane doing what she's doing. Is she running interference for the Remnant? Is she running it specifically for Gideon? And so it's still that melting pot of potential ideas. But I wouldn't discount the idea of Gideon having some connection, because especially with what we find out at the final scene, you know, the Beskar on the Lambda class. So you know, there's lots of options.
Right.
So
I mean, yeah. Who do you guys think took him? Do you think it was a like a setup, or do you think Mandalorians took him? Do you think it
Jodo Cast took him? That's what I think.
I have two crazy theories. The first one, probably the crazier one, is that Bo-Katan is actually behind this, and that after what happened in season 2, where he was like, oh, she knows all about the Darksaber, she has to kill you and the way she was like looking at the whole situation and processing it, I think in the time of her solitude alone, there's a chance that she's like been sort of setting this up. Let me get Moff Gideon to help me get that Darksaber back and take out and destructualize all those bad people. And now she's kind of stuck in a position because she sort of maybe understands their position now. So she's already released the bad guy on them, but now she's starting to regret that. So she's kind of like playing both fields. That's why I think they're like focusing in on her. Like she walks both paths. She's like, I walk more paths than you think I walk, kind of thing. That's how I felt at the end of the episode. But the other opportunity to that is that he wielded the Darksaber at one point. So that means if he knows the history and understands the history of it, there's a good chance that he probably also is aware of Maul, and when Maul ran the Mandalorians and when Maul was using the Darksaber. If he follows that walk of life, there's a good chance that we could see live action Maul-Dalorians behind, like as his thing as well.
Wow. Which wouldn't be surprising, because apparently, like, you know how much Dave loves and respects George Lucas. George Lucas's ideas for the sequel trilogy was that Darth Maul was the main villain.
Yeah.
And so if they have any way of honoring that in this time frame, that could be this.
That could be why we don't see the armorer without a helmet, because she has got the little sort of Zabrak bumps on her helmet.
Yes. Right.
Like maybe like, who knows? Like maybe there's a conversation that they had, part of the conversation that we didn't see, which is like, here's why you can remove your helmets, and I need you to do this and all this other stuff. And she comes out of that conversation feeling like she knows. Bo-Katan has more information than they're giving to the rest of the gang.
It's interesting. So, Mark, Lacey, any thoughts on who do you think in your gut is behind it? Because James, that's I never heard anyone say that, so that's wild. I'm torn. I'm not sure. Do you guys have any thoughts, or are you like me?
We all like you, John.
Thanks, man.
Go on, Lacey. Go on.
So my initial reaction was, oh my God, could this be Sabine? Because Sabine and Ahsoka are looking for Thrawn, and could they get to Moff Gideon, which then would lead them to Thrawn? But then quickly, as I was thinking after the episode, I was like, but they would never kill New Republic officers to get that. Like, that's a whole kind of dark side of Ahsoka that I never think she would do. You know, if they were on a bad side, then maybe, but I couldn't see her just killing people to kill them, unless they just got in the way. But to me, and I think people have been saying in the chat too, which I agree with, is like, it just seems kind of like a setup. Like, it wasn't Mandalorians. They just want people to think it's Mandalorians. Now, ultimately, could it be Thrawn? Could it be Moff Gideon himself and his team setting it up to look like he was taken and he really wasn't? It was his crew grabbing him. But there's definitely something that's planting it on the Mandalorians, or specifically on the Mandalorian, on Din Djarin, because he's kind of made this splash in the universe so far, which just seems to happen in Star Wars. Is like one character seems to make all these decisions, and then everyone's like knows who that person is. Kind of like a Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, all these people, but I feel like someone's trying to frame the Mandalorians, if not the Mandalorian, to make this an issue. And the question is, who could that be?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think when we first saw Bo-Katan in season 3, and she's sitting on the throne, and she's kind of pouting a little bit because things haven't gone the way she wanted, and she's a bit sort of lost at sea and annoyed. And she basically says, you know, the other Mandalorians, you know, it all fractured. They wouldn't follow me because I hadn't got the Darksaber, and many of them have gone back to being mercenaries. And I just think the first time we saw a Mandalorian in live action on screen was I know it's Boba Fett, and we know the history, and it's not quite, you know, like these Mandalorians, but essentially we saw a Mandalorian getting paid off by the Empire to go and hunt somebody down. So we know Mandalorians, the first time we ever see one, that arguably the most famous one, was being paid by the Emperor to do some pretty dark stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me if some of these Mandalorians, these other Mandalorians that have gone another way, and this is the way wherever you go, essentially, isn't it? Especially when we bring them all back into the fold, they've gone off, and some of them are doing pretty dark things because they're warriors, they're soldiers, they're not averse to doing questionable stuff.
I mean, the Mandalorian was doing that when we met him.
Exactly.
He was doing sketchy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the show went from being a bounty hunting show to it's not so much a bounty hunting show now, but it's, you know, that was definitely, like I say, it was the core of the beginning of it. So it wouldn't surprise me if there are other mercenary Mandos, which is Jango and Boba.
So what if, and I don't know, like when that would be put in place or when this happened, because we see the ship, we're not sure when the, you know, attack happened, because it's been a year since Book of Boba Fett's time, so it's been a while. Yeah. But I know, Lacey, when you and I were talking before, you had said like, oh, I think maybe Sabine, and I said maybe Axe Woves and Casca Reeves, because Bo-Katan is by herself. Where are they? We had heard rumors that they're going to be around, but that may serve James's theory that it is Bo-Katan, but she sent them to do the work,
right?
The dirty work, yeah.
And remember, Sasha Banks had that very weird decline that she's in season 3. It was just it was something about it. Like, these actors do a bad job of lying, where she was like, "Oh, I would have loved to, but I'm not on this one."
Who is this?
That's what she said, I think. Sasha Banks, who plays.
Oh,
Casca
she was
Reeves.
at the premiere though.
It's like when we saw Frank Oz at the premiere of The Last Jedi, I was like, what?
There's also toys where if you look at the back, it has Funko Pops for those two characters
for this season.
Yeah.
Oh man,
okay, that's interesting.
All right, we're gonna be honest. Something here, James.
Funko. They're toys regardless.
Or right, James. Yeah. So if that's huge. If it is Bo-Katan and she sent them, or they could have defected from Bo-Katan.
Or she could have sent them before all this.
She's pretty loyal.
She sent them before all this other stuff happened.
Before all that.
That was my thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
now James, she's a part of them.
That's a great point James makes, though, because this is a live situation, if you like, because these parts are moving around all the time. It could very well be that in her isolation, yeah, everything's not gone the way anybody thought it was going to go. That she does task these people to do things like that to try and advance the cause, to take back Mandalore and yada yada. And now
She's
all
in a
this
low
other stuff is
place, and
Which would
Totally that.
explain why her house got attacked. Because say they steal Moff Gideon and then Thrawn catches them and he finds out through torture that they work for Bo-Katan, he's going to go get back at Bo-Katan.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you tried to take my guy? I'm going to take your home.
There's a lot of loose threads that
Mhm.
it's just like this episode really opened up so many things. But James, I really do think you're onto something with that. I know that I think about it. But let's, there's other stuff we have to get to. What do you guys think overall of the pirates? Are you liking them? We've heard rumors that they may expand beyond this show. I personally do not think Gorian Shard died. I think he got out, like someone had mentioned before. Do you guys think he survived? I think that's too cool of a character to have him have a not off-screen death that quickly.
I guess
Depends. If he's in Skeleton Crew, sure, he's alive, but he looks like he's dead.
I mean, the Skeleton Crew rumor, and we're spoiling it for anybody if that that's out there, that these pirates may be the pirates or the lead bad guys in Skeleton Crew. I think it mainly led with the other one, the one that like escapes, which sort of then feeds to the theory that if every other pirate died but he like left and got away, then okay, well, he goes off and does his own thing. I'd like it to be Gorian Shard, but to me, when I watched the episode, I was like, that's a bummer, because he's like, I'm going down with the ship, and then they show the ship go down, and it's a huge explosion. Like, yeah, he could have got out, I guess, but like sometimes it's like sometimes the theories aren't worth it, and it's just easier to be like, oh, they killed off that character. That they're telling you something, and if you just believe that, then that's the story. And then when they pull one over, you get a surprise, instead of like trying to guess it, being wrong twice.
What if what if he fell out of the ship and he was tossed out?
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh my God.
I just think that with
don't bet on the house, John.
Yeah, there you go. High five in the Angels. Look at that. I just think that now with live action Star Wars, we can get flashbacks and they can show moments. So if in a year's time he comes back, they'll just flash back to previously on the Mandalorian, and you'll just see a little shuttle pod fly out or something like that. And I think back to Phantom Menace. This is why I think nobody's dead until you see the body. Mace Windu could turn up with one hand. Why not? You never saw him hit the ground. And good grief, you imagine doing it previously on the Phantom Menace, and you see the bottom half of Maul run off, and then the top half of Maul pull himself along with his arms, and somehow he survives, and we get the flashback. So yeah, I until they turn him into like an omelet or something.
That's so the truth, and it's also so the problem is like now, because they did it once, it's proof that they could always do it. And when they try to kill off a character, they can't just allow you to go through the story of like, we are telling you a story about how this character died, and forever it will be well, they
Captain
could
Kennedy
not be dead,
Captain Kennedy.
We're trying to tell you.
I blame Spock. It's Wrath of Khan, Nicholas Meyer's fault. He did it. Bringing Spock. That's what started all this.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, for sure. It's I don't know. I just feel like he's too cool to not be in the mix. Lacey, I do know we have a couple of super chats, so why don't we get to those and we'll continue this.
Sure. So we have our first super chat from Dave HORNAK, Indie Dave. What up, Dave?
Thank you, Dave.
He said, just want to support this great channel and community. Also, and without being on the screen yet this season, and Gideon is already framing the Mandalorians, he really doesn't like them.
Oh man.
We talk about this a lot, but the difference between him in season 1 and season 2 is just so crazy to me, because season 1, like that moment when he shows up to Navarro and he's like listing like all that personal information about them, it is chilling. And like that is the character that I think Jon Favreau wrote for Giancarlo Esposito. Like Jon Favreau was like, this is who I'm picturing and this is the guy I want. So when you get him in season 2 and he's not that guy anymore, I wanted that guy back, the first season guy. So I'm hoping that we're building to that.
I think it could happen. I think there's a really good chance that he could come back and he could be like, Mandalorian, you think all of this is just happening? Like, this is part of the plan, buddy, you know, like kind of thing. And it's
Yeah.
like he just reveals so much. And like, not like I don't know if the Bo-Katan thing is there, but if that were true, that would be a good example of how it could play out. It'd be like, I'm playing her, I'm playing him, I'm playing them, you know, like
Right.
it's all because
You
of
thought
me.
you got me, but at the end,
Yeah.
I'm still winning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, thanks, Dave. Then we have Freezy2324. Thank you so much for the super chat. He said, when do you think we'll see Luke again? This season of Mando or Ahsoka? Also, have any of you read Timothy Zahn's original Thrawn trilogy? Mark, I'm going to let you go first. Do you think we'll see Luke again this season or Ahsoka? And have you read Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy?
I have read Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy. Yes, back in
Which one?
When was that? 91, the original one.
No, I know. Yeah, he said original, but I'm just saying he's had 3 trilogies.
That's true. That's very true. I don't think we'll see Luke in this. Oh, I'm very happy to be wrong. I don't think we'll see Luke in Mando again, but I think there's a good chance you'll see him in Ahsoka. There was that nice understanding between Luke and Ahsoka in that Book of Boba Fett scene. So I'd be not disappointed, but I'd be surprised if we didn't see him. It feels like now with every episode, and I think even at the start of this one, I don't think it said previously on The Mandalorian. I think it said previously because a chunk of it was from Book of Boba Fett. So so it was they've got that option now that you'll get maybe a year or two down the road, and you'll have a flashback or a montage of previously on Star Wars.
Previously, it's like Rebels season 2 or something. It's
that's
like,
it.
What
that's
is
it.
happening?
Previously in canon.
Yeah, in canon, so I think I'd like to see him, and other characters turning up wouldn't surprise me. I mean, like I say, we've had Zeb this week, and that was great, and other moments, but I think Ahsoka's probably where you'll see Luke next.
I think
John,
so
what do you
too.
think?
I think there's going to be the Luke and Anakin Force Ghost scene that's going to make everybody cry. That's what I think.
Ooh.
It's going to be heavy duty. Big time.
I like that.
James?
I think that the Book of Boba Fett skipped over something that I felt was very important to happen, and that was the Ahsoka Luke conversation.
Yes, it did.
Was private. That like I knew your dad, he was saved. Or the, you know what I mean? Like I knew your dad, and he was saved, is what Luke says back to Ahsoka.
She doesn't know that. Yeah.
All this, but it seems like when we got him in Book of Boba Fett and we saw them on screen the first time together, they already knew each other. And I was like, I want them meeting, or I want them having those hard conversations. That's why I think if we get Luke and Ahsoka, it's more likely going to be a flashback to show us those scenes.
That'd be cool. Yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with that. Yeah.
You've just said something there, John. That's just really got me thinking that if they did that Force Ghost scene, you'd have Hamill and Christensen doing a scene together, which is something you'd never in your wildest dreams imagine would happen.
Oh man, wouldn't that be just watching the gallery of that?
Yeah,
That'd be
nuts.
Oh, that'd be crazy.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
now I hope we see it, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to get my
Appreciate it.
expectations up. I'm going to be smart about it.
You don't want
All
to get
right,
your hopes up, but it's more of a Force spirit, to be honest with you.
Yes, right. So we have a few minutes here. I know there's probably a lot that we didn't really cover. So Mark, is there anything that you feel like we needed to touch on about this episode before we do some light speculating on what we might see next week?
One thing is it's kind of not anything to do with the story. It's actually to do with the production. Everyone's a sort of a Monday morning quarterback, to use an American phrase, about all these things and how expert they are on picking out visual effects and how terrible the stagecraft is, and I could see the corners and blah blah blah. And this season, because you do get kind of savvy to where to look and things like that, I think this season's been just phenomenal visually. And so this episode, seeing that cruiser come in, it looked a bit like a Hammerhead Corvette type shit, didn't it? I didn't catch the name of the
Corsair.
Yeah.
They
named
are.
it, didn't they?
If I'm not mistaken, those ships are associated with Thrawn in Legends.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it did look familiar, but it was I couldn't quite place. But anyway,
Somebody knows the name or something.
It was said in there, wasn't it? I think they did mention the class. But anyway, just seeing it above a city, because it was always the thing, you only ever saw Star Destroyers in orbit, and then all of a sudden they're in atmosphere and la la la. So now you see vehicles like that you saw the shadow before Grief looked up, and moments like that, just visually just stunning. And you say about the direction, You know, just some of the choices, just the angles. You saw the Grief Karga moment from about 3 different angles, the hologram moment, and just things like that, just little details just really made it sing for me. And so this episode, that really, amongst everything else that was very pleasing, that really stood out to me. I thought it was phenomenally well done, this episode. But this is one of the ones that will get put forward for, next year's VFX awards. It was one of those.
I think you're right, because it's one of those episodes where everywhere you look, there's something to enjoy or absorb, all the way down to just the monkey lizards scampering when they're being fired upon in the tree.
Yeah.
Like
when they tattle on them, when they tattle on the
Right.
bad
Yes.
yeah.
We need this episode to be twice as long, because like the whole thing with the hyperspace and how they were moving 3D around the ships in hyperspace and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, I could be wrong, they probably have done this, but we actually got one of those exit hyperspace and the planet zooms in, and I'm like, I don't feel like we've been getting those, but that's like movie exit hyperspace quality.
That was Death Star 2 entry to Endor moment, wasn't it? With the coming
Oh
up.
yeah, absolutely, yes. And they love those old techniques. One other thing that I think is really important to bring up, and we literally have not said his name once, is Grogu.
Yes.
And I think that's why this episode is so important. We're sitting here giving this thing 9s and 8.5s, and it showed that this show doesn't need to lean on the transcending figure of Grogu for it to still be a great show. Because that's one of the critique people who maybe not love Mando are saying, like, oh, it's just because of the Baby Yoda hype. That's why people like it and stuff. We are super Star Wars nerds. We love it. We've been on for 1 hour and 2 minutes. We didn't mention the word Grogu once this last hour. He was barely featured in the show. He was there, but we had this full loaded, amazing episode that pushed the entire plot and story forward and got all these new threads and questions asked. And I didn't feel like, where is he? I need to find out what's going on with him. It shows that this show is sustainable without him, but we obviously want him there. So I think it was a really important episode for that reason too.
Mm-hmm.
Big time.
Yeah,
big time.
He, like I said, he did have a very specific moment too, where Paz Vizsla is getting up and he's explaining all these things, that it was all for this child kind of thing. He ends up turning around, kind of turning it into a different moment, but we're specifically pointing out Grogu in that scene. He kind of had a moment of like, is all of the life that has been lost worth one foundling? That that concept has been brought up in this episode. I also, just to mark it off the list really quick too, they also did, I want to talk about the Heart 5 thing just really quickly, like mention it at least, that is like, oh, one of the, resistance or one of the rebellion is like in your ranks. So it's like, not all, they're double downing, double dipping on that whole thing, that he was in fact part of the rebellion and helped R2 and all that stuff. I thought that was interesting in this episode. So a little nod. But John, I'll let you take us where we want to go, but we have gone this whole episode without talking about Zeb, and I thought that was going to be a huge portion of this.
We got to spend a couple minutes on
really
Zeb.
Discussed it.
Yeah. And that's fine. Like, my quick thoughts on it. I loved how he was introduced. It wasn't one of these, like, sometimes in the Clone Wars, they're a little too on the nose with the references and callbacks to what you know that character for. In this, he just sort of rolled up and he's just started talking about that situation. It wasn't like, well, when me and Kanan and Hera were in the, he just started, he was talking about his job and what's going on right now. And I love that introduction to him in live action. It didn't have to be this grandiose thing. And then, like, when he first came on screen, I was like, wait a minute. And then I heard him talk. I was like, oh, so, and I thought it was well done. It was how I felt about seeing Cad Bane in live action. I thought they executed it perfectly. I haven't seen people critique it too much or anything like that. It gets me even more excited for Ahsoka. I mean, I loved it. Yeah. Let's go around.
He looked really good. There was a moment, just like you, John, that I was watching and I was like, is that him? Because there's always a moment that, like, with the Anzellans, people immediately thought, oh, it's Babu Frick. And you're like, no, it can't be Babu Frick. So you're just like, is it? It is. Oh my God, it is. And then part of me then goes to the place that most Star Wars fans go is, okay, so Katie made the jump. Steve made the jump.
Oh yeah,
Who else is making the jump here?
yeah.
It's just one of those things that it's weird, but you couldn't picture a different voice with that character. But it was such a moment that I know when I saw it, I went, James is somewhere freaking out. That's what I said in my head. Is like, because before this season even started, James, I think one episode we were like, will Zeb show up? And I was like, I don't know. I don't think so. They'll probably save that for Ahsoka.
That was
and
our
you were,
bold predictions. That was
and you were-
John's.
yeah, and you guys were talking about it. And I was like, I don't know, guys. Like, they might save that, but here he is. Here he is. And I love that
I forgot about
about. Yeah, I love that about Filoni.
I think I used it as a short even.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where Filoni has just been like taking these characters and kind of taking the expectations out of them in like the best way, because he's saying, here are those characters you love, and it doesn't have to be a Luke Skywalker beating all the droids to get up to the big reveal blast doors opening.
Exactly.
It could literally be someone coming up being like, hey man, what are you drinking? Cool, see you later, and walk away, and you're like, what did I just witness?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good spot. I think it's been a good week if you're a Macquarie fan as well, because seeing Zeb is basically seeing the early version of Chewie, and seeing Monument Plaza with all those sort of the big light buildings, you know, the very Macquarie looking thing. So that's been a nice nod as well. But Lacey's right, you know, it was cool that he was just there. He just happened to be at the bar having a drink, and along comes Carson, and they have a bit of an exchange, and it was very natural and also nice that the other side of the bar was Filoni, literally in his hat. But just to have these moments, yeah, you don't need to throw them into an amazing action sequence. You know, if we do see, I mean, we've got Dial of Destiny coming up in a couple of months. It's really coming up fast. And there's a 50-year-old Harrison Ford. And, you know, if they wanted to throw a Han Solo cameo into this, you'd have let's say a 40-year-old Harrison Ford playing Han a few years after he was in Jedi. And if he turns up in anything other than a cool asteroid type chase, I'd be like, oh, I want to see Han Solo. You know, they can do it now. Let's have a cool Han Solo. But by the same token, if Han Solo's just sitting in a booth shooting a Rodian, I'd be equally happy as long as he shoots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't have to be the greatest hits always to enrich our experience.
The Zeb thing blew my mind. It was incredible to see him come around the corner and to hear him talk. Like you guys have said, he looks so good, but like I think we're even understating that. Like there's something about the fact that I don't know what I'm looking at, to the degree of like at times I was like, is this a full CG character? I bet it is, but they might be doing that tricky thing where they're grounding you with like a full, like a tangible body. And then they're replacing head and arms, you know, or potentially even just the head. But there was motion in there. There's like one specific scene where he like puts his head down and he like turns it over to Carson. I was like, I just kept going back and rewatching it. I was like, how did they get?
It is not a mask. It is definitely CG.
No. I got that. I'm not saying it's a mask. I'm saying they used a body, a physical body. They could replace the head, replace the arms,
and that dude is big.
Also
whoever it is,
CG,
that dude is big.
But I'm like, how do they make this so believable? This looks so good, but it also raised so many questions. I'm like, why is Zeb in the New Republic right now? This is. You know, what would it say, like 9 or 10 years after what I understood him to go, like outside of the galaxy to where his people were recreating and building their society and stuff. And I'm like, if he's left, that also makes me think maybe Callus has left too. So he now becomes an option as well.
People were talking about that in the chat too. That's a great point.
Maybe have moved back into this society. I could see Callus being like, no, I'm done, you know, and if I go back, then people are going to question my loyalty, whereas Zeb was always with the rebellion, so he's cool. But I found it really interesting that he's currently like just an officer of the New Republic. I'm like, that's interesting. How did he, Mark, you mentioned this earlier, way in the episode, how did he get from here to here? And that is just perfect placement of him coming in. And I can say this too. I never, like, I know we got Ahsoka. She's technically in Rebels, but she's also like Clone Wars. She's a bigger character than this. I would have not thought that this is basically the first, we got Chopper too, but this is basically the first Rebels crew member. Like, I would have expected it to be Sabine. I would have expected it potentially to be Hera. There's probably not going to be Ezra or Thrawn, but it could have been. But it's Zeb. They did Zeb. I'm like, what? That's wild to me. What a choice. Perfect execution. It was awesome.
I also have to
Great
note that the other half of that, scene partner, Paul, was amazing. Carson Teva was so good this episode. We really haven't spoken about it. Just like how good he was, and like how awesome his character is, and how righteous he is, and what's, what needs to be done. And it's showing once again that the New Republic is just totally incompetent with what's going on. They're in over their heads. And I'm sitting there going, give him the Ranger show. Give it to him. He wants to do it. We want to watch it. Give it to him. Like a detective show where he goes around the galaxy and solves these crimes that the Rangers aren't, or the Republic's not getting involved in. Like, that's an awesome show.
It just strikes me. I just wonder, the Rangers as a concept feels a little bit to me splintering off from the Republic, a bit like the Resistance splinters off, because there's so much inaction, nobody's doing anything. The layers like, we've got to do something. So that comes about, and I just wonder in this time period, when you see the bureaucracy and just the inaction and just how easily distracted they are, stick a box of biscuits in front of them, they'd be completely blown away.
He becomes kind of like a Batman character, where he's like going off and doing and helping people because the Republic won't step in. He's like a vigilante kind of. I love that idea.
This was my pitch for a Star Wars show. Post episode 9, do a Scooby-Doo show. Get all the peripheral characters in the Falcon and just going off solving mysteries.
I love it.
You could do that with these guys in this area. It's totally there to be done.
Paul is so good. He's so good.
He's a great actor for sure. He carried the episode from an acting perspective, in my opinion.
And R5, where he's like, someone tipped me off, and he comes wheeling out like, yeah.
We're definitely getting. We're definitely getting to that point too, where we have a lot of these characters that could show up in that Rangers. I mean, they'll probably never bring back Cara Dune, but that was someone that was set up for that.
Bill Burr.
And then Bill Burr's character. Now we also have Steve Bloom as Zeb, who could potentially be one of these people as well. I don't think they would do the 3 directors, but they could make appearances here and there. Carson Teva potentially leading the show, and don't also forget Timothy Oliphant as well. He is probably holding down Tatooine. That's probably what they're leading in. But as far as just a general lawman, that would be fighting for good and potentially the New Republic, then, that's another character that when you say Rangers of the New Republic, it's like, give him a badge. He holds down Tatooine, but he's a Ranger nonetheless, or whatever. Yeah,
and if you listen carefully, when he's leaving the Mandalorian cave and getting back into his X-Wing, they once again play the March of the Resistance theme.
Right.
So there's going to be connections between what this evolves into. I'm not saying they're going to go out in a blaze of glory or anything, but they're, like you said, Mark, it's the same sort of analogy or setup, and this is sort of maybe the blueprint of what becomes the Resistance a couple decades later. So it is very interesting. They keep using that March of the Resistance theme to let us know, like, this is sort of going to be weaving in, because I believe they also used that in Solo when Memphis Ness was talking about a rebellion, so it's a real thing, and I like that they pepper that in, and it looks like we're going to be enriching our path to the sequel trilogy on both ends of the side, the dark side with the cloning and Palpatine, and also the Resistance and what the Adelphi Rangers become and what that evolves into. So
I still want that Rancor patch. Still want it.
Yeah. So I don't know how much more he's going to be in this series, but Paul Sun-Young Lee deserves a nomination, if anything, because his acting is definitely top shelf. Without question, in this episode, he was a clear standout, and that goes a long way, especially in Star Wars. Star Wars, they make the joke that you could write this stuff, but you can't say it, George, and he's doing a good job of saying it. So I know we're up on time. Mark, you've been a trooper for us and guesting on with us. We want you to be able to go back and get some sleep. So I'll just ask you a quick question. Do you think we see Moff Gideon next week?
If I say yes, then you won't see him, because every time I've guessed at something, it's not happened. I think a lot of us at the top end of the season or the start of the season thought, oh, this whole season is going to be about Din getting to Mandalore and bathing in the living waters, and how does he get there, and how does he do it, and what does he face? And it's done by the second episode.
Yeah, they did it very quickly.
Yeah,
and he fell in too. It wasn't just a big build-up. He literally fell.
Yeah, well, that's exactly. Yeah, and then you build up to this pirate character, and he's we're going to come back to the the cabbage guy, and then you see him in the next episode, and now he's been toast, and as far as we guess. So I don't know. I mean, now it seems that the next plot point will be Bo-Katan going out and finding more Mandalorians. Well, as we've spitballed ideas today, she probably knows exactly where they are. She's probably got them on speed dial, So how that's going to play out? Okay, here's my prediction on rabbiting, like I always do. I think next episode's focal character will be Bo-Katan. I think we're going to be following her on a mission. Whether she's got Mando with her or not, I don't know. My head tells me no, but I will say Bo-Katan.
I think that's a great point, because I believe it was Bryce Dallas Howard that directed the live-action introduction of Bo-Katan. So that would be a comfort zone for both. So James Lacey, do you think any Moff Gideon, or are we putting him off to even later?
Gideon?
Oh God, stop. Mark, I think you make a good point there. Going off what John just said, it would be really perfect if Bryce was directing an episode for Bo-Katan. A woman director with a woman-led episode would be like so powerful. It is interesting though to note, and this might have been a mess up by Katie Sackhoff. She did give an interview where they asked her, "What's your favorite episode?" And she said 5, which was this one. So if she has a bigger episode, you would think she'd choose that, but maybe she just liked this one because of the reveal and as a fan. So I just had to think that, but I do agree with you, Mark. I think the next episode's going to probably focus on her. I think the Mandalorian will go with her. And I think he's going to grapple with there's going to be a kind of, so she let you take your helmet off? Like, there has to be something.
How does your hair look so good?
There has to be a moment of like, how did this happen? Like, because he went through, she rejected him twice. Like, you're a Mandalorian no more. Like, all that stuff. And then totally was just like, it was totally just like, no, you can take it off. Totally cool. We're cool. Cool. And then, no, it's so weird. And even Paz Vizsla was like, yo, what? So I agree with you, Mark. I think the next episode is going to be focused on her and like figuring out what's going on. Relationships are going to be tested a little bit. Grappling with who is the leader.
Yeah, my predictions, first off about that helmet thing is like, I think Din Djarin and Paz Vizsla both were born into that. So I think they hear that and they go, oh, didn't know that. But I don't think they're so much like envious of that. Like, oh, what? Like, you can take your helmet off. I think it's like, oh, yes, she was born into a different sector or, section of what we believe or whatever. Now she's accepted this, but that's not really her or her whole childhood and all that upbringing. But what I'm going to go opposite you guys. I'm going to say that the next episode will not focus on Bo-Katan, because what I think could happen is, unless my predictions all lead to one major thing, but I think there's a chance that she goes off. Now we get, characters with Mando or whatever. We do whatever episode next week, or maybe even episode 7 as well. And then when she returns with a bunch of Mandalorians. Like this is her going away so that we get a couple episodes without her. And then when she returns, we're like, oh shoot, that's right. She left and this is what she's been doing that time. And I think 2 weeks off from that character, or just a week maybe, is enough for us to go, how long has she been gone? What's she been doing in the past? But if we go right back to see what she's doing, it doesn't reveal anything. It doesn't. She doesn't walk over the mountain with like a soul, a group of people. So
she's not going to
Mando going to get the Resistance fleet at the end of 9.
I was going to say Gandalf coming over the 2 towers over the hill with all the
right there you go. Yeah, it's Bad Batch this morning. I made a Lord of the Rings reference as well, something similar to that. But I just I don't know. I think. I was going to say that this episode, the very next episode, leads right into Celebration. So I don't know that has any tie to it, but it's the episode that people are going to be most recently talking about before they go to Celebration. So maybe there's something cool there. But
Yeah,
I wish
I
they
think
were
it's
doing
hard
a
to.
screening at Celebration, but I get why, because we'll be there 2 days later.
Yeah.
But
Disney has enough problems going on with Disney Plus that I think scheduling a certain episode to land around Celebration was not on the list to check off. But it is a big episode because then you have 2 more to go, and 7 is co-written by Filoni, so you got to assume that's when more Rebels characters come in. And 7 and 8 are both directed by Rick Famuyiwa, who's executive producer. So I almost feel like that's going to be like this 2-headed finale sort of thing.
Sabina's so showing up. She's showing
So
up.
I feel like this next episode really needs to answer some questions about Mandalorian as a show itself as we do the transition into Ahsoka with the finale and stuff. So it's going to be a big episode either way, and I think they had the right person in the chair. I never, who would have said that 4 years ago when it's like Bryce Dallas Howard's doing her first directing ever, and it's in The Mandalorian, and we're like, ooh, I don't know. And now, especially after that Book of Boba Fett episode she did, everyone's like, more Bryce Dallas Howard, please. And we feel confident going into it. So I'm very excited about the momentum from this great episode heading into next week. So, and we'll all be at Celebration together, Mark, talking about it. So you've come over here so many times. It's time for us to play an away game and head on your turf next week. So very excited to see you. I'm very excited to see everybody at Celebration. And of course, if you're not going to Celebration, we will make sure we're doing the best we can to cover that for you. And of course, if you are going to Celebration, check out our live podcast Sunday, April 9th at 11 a.m. in the HoloNet News Stage Room 17. Come on by Easter Sunday and come hang out with us. All right. So before we get out of here, first, Mark, I want to thank you again very, very much for taking the time. I know it's late over there, so thank you. And make sure everybody's checking out Fantha Tracks, the podcast Making Tracks, whatever Mark's writing on Star Wars Insider, StarWars.com, all that stuff. And of course, Prefix_timing. He's a big troublemaker on Twitter, a huge troublemaker. So make sure you follow him over there. Just a loudmouth on Twitter. But no, Mark, thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. No, it's always fun to come and talk to you guys. So it doesn't matter what time of the day. It's all good.
Thanks, buddy. Late. All right. And then as far as we go, you can find me on Twitter at Johnny Hoey and my movie podcast, Just Like the Movies. We're going to be doing Airheads next in honor of Academy Award winner Brendan Fraser. Lacey, how about you?
People can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Lacey Gilleran, on TikTok and at It's Lacey Gilleran. And then also you can see all 3 of us. Sorry, Mark, he's going back to bed, but the 3 of us on Patreon right after this for an exclusive Spice Run chat with one of our Spice Runners, David Probus, who's also in the chat. So come and join us on Patreon right after this.
Yes. And James, how about you, buddy?
Twitter and Instagram both at Myra Trunks.
All right. We'll be back next week to discuss Chapter 22 of The Mandalorian from London. So we're probably going to try to do some sort of abridged Mando fan show. We'll get you your next Mando code, and we'll do some sort of reaction and video of us, 3 of us together talking about this. And if someone that we know is around us, we may pull them right into the mix and have them talk about it too. But we want to thank everybody once again for joining us. And from the 4 of us here at the Mando Fan Show, we will see you around, kids.